Morning to all. First and foremost, I am thankful to the Indus for calling me, their Center for Indus Studies, as well as the Registrar and CEO and others who are present here for the talk. I also thank all the students, and I am told some of you have come from Ahmedabad, so commuting all the way, and thanking you for that also. Today we will have two sessions, one in the immediately about what is happening on a global scale, what is the implication for India and what is happening there, and the second one we will talk about caste as social capital. Actually, I have got three books on this topic. One is called India Unincorporated or Non-Corporate India, what is popularly called the unorganized sector. And the second book is on black money and tax havens. And the third is on caste as social capital. So, it's available in Flipkart, Amazon, everywhere. I would encourage all of you to buy it, right. Kindly note, I am not asking you to read it, just buy it, that is enough for me, right. Because reading is nowadays considered as a very tough task, right. Whenever I ask my students at my MBA program, they immediately complain, what is this sir, you are asking us to read another. Reading is not a popular activity nowadays, right. Anyhow, now see there in the year 99-2000, approximately that time, I am sure some of you, most of you might have been in school or or not even in school, might not have been much lower level classes. There was a crisis in some of the Asian countries like Thailand, Indonesia, South Korea, Philippines, and that was called Asian financial crisis. And a large number of discussions took place. IMF and World Bank went and helped those countries. Some of the banks were, went afoot, but somehow they were put in proper shape after a couple of months. That was called Asian financial crisis, and significant number of papers were written and by professors and published and other thing. Some of us got promotion, and a crisis is a major opportunity for professors, you should know this, and because it helps us to tell how the crisis could have been avoided after the crisis. So we say that no, if only we had done those things, crisis would not have been there. That was called Asian financial crisis. Then around 2004-05, there was one major crisis at some of the Latin American countries, Peru, Uruguay, Chile, Venezuela, many of these countries had. Brazil did not have so much of problem, but all other. That was called Latin American financial crisis. Again, one full round of discussions, and IMF went and provided extra funds. Some of the banks were recapitalized and other things. That was called Latin American financial crisis. Now for the last something like 7-8 years, there is a crisis in Greece, Ireland, Spain, Portugal, then England and France. Now it is spreading to Germany also, and this crisis is called global financial crisis or global economic crisis. So very interesting. When something happens in Asia, it's called Asian crisis. When something happens in Latin America, it's called Latin American crisis. When something happens in a few countries of Europe, it's called global crisis. So the terminology is very important, what is the word we use, because Europe still thinks that it is the center of the world. It still feels that it has got a lot of holidays, and so it has become global crisis. First and foremost is, it's not a global crisis, it's an Anglo-Saxon crisis, we will see that. And of course, it's called global economic crisis, and we are, we consider ourselves global now, right? India is, we are global, and so we feel we are also in crisis. So as a corollary, there is a global crisis, so we are also in crisis. So actually it is not that, it's not, we are in no way connected with the major crisis, we will establish that actually. What exactly is the crisis? You can see in the form of a very simple graph. This is something which you can see there. What is the share of global GDP? Many of you might have heard the word GDP. How many have heard the word GDP? So okay, gross, you can loosely call it as income of the country, income of a country, national income, like your income. And if you see there is a group called G7. G7 is group of 7 countries consisting of USA, England, Germany, France, Canada, what you may loosely call the developed countries, or G7 they are called. Now it is called G20. Several others have also been included into that, like India and other countries are also part of that. The G7 had more than half of the share of the global income. You can see there 51% approximately was their share in the year 1990. Most of you might not have been perhaps born that time, so not very far away, sort of. And something like 36% was that of the what are called emerging markets or developing countries, you may loosely call. Major emerging markets are India, China, Brazil and Indonesia in terms of the size, These are the 4 countries which are considered as major emerging market. They had 36%. Of course, you will be wondering, GDP based on PPP we have written there, that is purchasing power parity. It is basically a indicator developed by IMF to compare income of different countries, because you can't directly compare, because there are inflation issues, purchasing power issues. For instance, as an example, I earned 50,000 rupees in Bangalore, let us say. My niece who is teaching at California, she earns around $50,000 US dollar. Both are 50,000. That does not automatically mean that both are on the same level of purchasing power. I can get in Bangalore sort of a maid to help me in cleaning our floor and washing our vessels and drying clothes, something for 5,000 rupees or 4,000 to 5,000 rupees per month. In her case, she might have to pay something like $55 per hour for getting this work done by the some laborer, mostly from Mexico perhaps, and they come and then they do all this work. Kindly note, here what I get for 5,000 per month, she gets for $55 per hour. So there is a huge difference in our purchasing power. Even though both of us make 50,000, but I am in a better position in terms of getting some of these services at a much lower price. But of course, other areas like goods, these are called non-tradable. This servant maid and these services are non-tradable. But other things like you are buying say rice or wheat or all those things, she is in a much better position. Our purchasing power is much relatively higher. Here on an average a middle class may spend something like 50 to 60% in buying provisions and milk, vegetables and other thing of his salary. There it would be hardly 12 to 15%. So that is a sort of a difference. But basically the idea is you can't compare two numbers directly. You require some method of adjusting for the purchasing power, and that is what is done by IMF. We won't get into the technicalities of how it is adjusted, another thing. It is an econometric procedure by which it is adjusted. On the basis of that adjustment, around 2017, actually 2017 October was the changing time, the G7 had 36% of the global income, whereas the emerging market had 52% of the global income. We can see how the scenario has shifted. What was 50% has become 36, what was 36 has become 52. And kindly observe another interesting thing, the decline of G7 is what we statistically call monotonically declining. That means it is continue, there is nothing called sometime decline, sometime increase, no, it is continuously declining. Similarly, the increase is also continuously increasing. And the forecast is by 2025, another 5 years, the G7 may have something like 25% only of the global income. So, the remaining will be with the emerging markets. Or major research was undertaken by Angus Maddison, who is an economist at Oxford for OECD. That time there was a lot of discussion about China coming into the European and American market. China wanted to sell its cars, automobile into those markets in the 80s, and they were all laughing at it actually. Actually, a lot of these American papers wrote some joke type of a thing. China sell, somebody told China is going to sell those small plastic cars or something. Somebody told no, it is meant for children, small metallic which are sold in the shop. You would have seen, you give key and then it will run for some time, all that. But actually China came in the 80s and slowly began to increase its sales, and it more or less had significant share of the American and European market within a period of 10 years. So, they were really surprised actually, because normally they thought China, did I say China? It's Japan actually. The Japan normally they thought this they are in the mountains and praying to Buddha and other things. That was the idea of the US, and they never associated Japan with any type of technological capability. And so they were really surprised where from these fellows have come, how are they able to capture our, and quite a large number of European and American were appreciating Japanese cars because they felt that it is technologically very advanced and it gives more mileage, because by then the fuel crisis have also come, fuel prices have gone up and all those things anyhow. So, they commissioned OECD to conduct a study of where from these fellows have come, what were they doing. So, because their knowledge of all these Asian countries was relatively very poor. The associated Asian countries is generally doing meditation and spirituality, and they never thought that these people can make cars. So, the Angus Maddison undertook a study. He had a huge team of experts with him, geologists, then historians, then linguists, all the people. He studied where was the world from the 1st century AD till 20th century. Every century, what was the share of these different countries and other things. He found very interestingly, till 1800, the China and India had more than 50% of the global income. Every century, 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century, every century till 1800. After that, the decline started for China and India both, due to colonialism as well as due to industrial revolution in the Europe. So, this he did the study, and then he told, so both India and China are not now retrieving their old position. He called them as re-emerging markets. That is the terminology he used. He said, don't call these as emerging market, that is not correct. Emerging looks that somewhere from nowhere they are coming out, but they are not emerging, they are re-emerging. They were already in a good position in the world, in between they lost out and now they are coming back. And it was also felt that what decline started around 1820 and the rise of these other countries took place, and that will come to an end in 2020. 200-year cycle it is called actually. So, in another, we are already in 2020. So, we can see that the cycle is over and the story of Europe according to most of the experts is over. That is the most important point we should keep in the back of the mind. So, and this study of course is exhaustively we have written in our book and other thing, and every century they were having more than 50% of the world share of GDP, India and China, except it started decline around 1800, 1820 and then now it is again going up according to this study. Now, very interestingly or coincidentally or whatever you call it, Aurobindo, many of you would have heard about Maharishi Aurobindo. How many of you have heard about him? Not very many, anyhow. He was a freedom fighter and so he was considered as one of the major forces. He came to, some of you might have read about it, he came to Pondicherry and created an ashram and he became later more like a sannyasi, even though initially he started as a, he said somewhere around 1917, 1917, which is when there was no internet, there was no WhatsApp, there was no, what do you call, Instagram, no econometric model building and other thing. 1917 he told, what started as the rise of Europe in 1820 will come to an end in 2020. Something very, very interesting and fascinating. That's why some of them we call as Dirgadarshis, who are able to visualize what shape of things could come. He was not doing any major economic research or anything, if you go and ask him what is your data, what is your survey methodology, and nothing could be shown. But still he was able to say that something coincidental you may call it, very interesting actually, I thought we should mention. Now this is not going to, actually I was asked by some business channel I think, they asked me how long it will take to recover. I told 80 quarters it will take to recover. That girl was very, very sharp who kept the mic before me. 80 quarter, 80 by 4, that means 20 years sir. I told 80 by 4 is 20, there is no doubt about that, right? Always 80 by 4 is 20. So 20 years it will take. After that no business channel came to me, no business paper, because they thought this fellow is a very gone case, pessimist. Because everybody was telling about green shoots coming up, something is developing, nothing is happening. Then I told that girl, that business channel person, look, I am a teacher. I normally don't want to tell bad things, right? Even if my student gets 5 out of 100 marks, I tell him there is scope for improvement, right? 5 out of 100 means there is a huge scope for improvement. Am I right, sir? So there is a, because I can't tell him that you are a useless fellow, you should not have come to this program, you should not have taken my course and other thing. It's a very risky thing, because he will take me to Human Rights Commission or something like that, and then all big tamasha will take place. Everybody will say, why are you, you can never tell a student that you are not knowing anything, because immediately it will be told, and then in the evening Arnab Goswami may conduct a discussion also. Should IIM professor say their students are bad or something, and then finally they will conclude, I am totally responsible for all the problem. Today if a student is not doing well, kindly note the teacher is totally responsible, not the student, and his parents will make a complaint, sir he didn't do a good job, and then my principal will call me and tell, why are you telling he is bad and everything, don't tell anything, because they have all come and it will create some noise and our, so what do you keep quiet and then you give some grace mark. Sir 5 only he got out of 100, more grace, grace should be much higher, right? So like that I told that business channel people, I don't want to say it will never recover. Actually it is not going to recover, I can tell you that much. And instead of telling never recover, I told 20 years it will take to recover, so that you feel some possibility, some comfort. It is not going to recover. The story of G7 is over actually. That we should recognize. Why it has come to this level? One of the major thing is Of course, if you are curious, the current global position on purchasing power parity, current mean 2019 last year, China is the number one country with the 27 US dollar trillion US dollar. Trillion is 1000 billion and 1 billion is 100 crore. So, you can add all the zeros and find out in your calculator. US is number 2, India is 3 and Japan is 4. This is the position globally as of 2019. So, all over the world they say these are the 4 countries which you should watch for the coming 30-40 years. In the beginning of last century, it used to be Germany, England, Russia and France. These were the 4 countries which were expected to be watched for the next 30-40 years. Now, in this century, these are the 4 countries which require, and they will have dance in different fashion. Japan with US, India with Japan, India with China. This will go on for the next 4 to 5 decades at least. This is on purchasing power parity basis, and on actual basis we are now number 5. US is this is without adjusting for any purchasing power or inflation or anything. It is a nominal, it is called, that is just rupee converted into dollar and Deutschmark converted into dollar, like that. In that we see US, China, Japan, Germany and India. India is roughly 3 trillion actually. We are slightly above our former masters UK and France. These are the 2 countries which is slightly below us, and we are expected to cross Germany in another 2 years, hopefully, if everything goes well. So, 3 trillion to we will be. So, this is the position. So, we are on a global nominal term, we are 5th, number 5. Okay. Now, why these countries have got into this difficulty? Primarily the level of debt is phenomenally high in these countries. Canada, Russia, US, you can see almost US is now more than 300%. This is slightly 1.5-2 year before data. Now US is above 300%. Britain is more than 500% of the GDP. Overall debt is phenomenally high. Our own Britain, I call it, because in 2-3 years they will request us to run their country, I can tell you. And they will say, sir, we ran your country for 200 years, why don't you come and run our country for another, right. So, you all have huge opportunity to run not only India, run Britain, right. It is a very, so they are in fairly, running Britain does not automatically mean all of you, Indian soldiers should go there or nothing like that. See, already significant portion of their bank reconciliation is done from Bangalore. Their health services are done from Hyderabad. Their pension services are done from Gurugram. The only thing pending is budget. The British budget is still presented by their finance minister. Once that also is asked to be done by India, then we are running their country, that is all. So, using software, kindly note, today you can decide to be a dominant player in any country. It is not required that like a old time you should send tanks and army and anyhow. Now, when you say debt or borrowing, there are 3 types of debt. One is government debt, which is what is called sovereign debt, and that is not even rated, that is considered to be always it can be paid back. There is no default risk in that debt, because every government in the world has got access to the Nasik press, like in India. We have a printing press of notes and other things. So, all governments in the world can avail of it and then meet the obligation of borrowing. That is called government debt. That is not of so much amount of concern. Other is corporate debt. Corporate means companies borrowing another, and that devolves mostly on the banks. All over the world nowadays, in the very old time, corporate debt means the corporate will get closed and all the, but now increasingly bigger the debt, banks come forward and then finally the government gets into and then recapitalizes the bank, and And also the size is important actually. Modern finance tells you a very interesting thing. If I borrow 80 lakhs from say HDFC or some bank for my flat, I want to acquire a flat, I want to borrow 1 crore. Then every month I have to be worried about EMI. I am sure most of you would have heard about EMI, right? Okay. I will be worried how much to manage, how to pay. And if I had borrowed 8,000 crore, who will worry? Huh? The banker will worry. So modern finance tells you the larger you borrow, you shift the worry to the lender. Most important, remember. So if you want to borrow, don't borrow 80 lakh, 1 crore or nothing. Don't go and borrow for very large sum. After that you can be, you can coolly go to London also and settle down. You know how to do it, right? So the corporate debt is the next biggest possible issue. And third is the household debt. And household debt is the time bomb, which is in all these countries. Huge amount of debt by the households. What for? One for the house itself, which is on mortgage, for which they have to pay EMI and other. Then second for education, significant amount of price increase has taken place in education. If I am sure some of you might have heard about it in countries like USA, UK, everywhere education has become very expensive actually. So you have to borrow for that and then you have to pay throughout your life and other things. Even in India, for that matter, education has become relatively expensive, and lower you go, more you have to pay. Very interesting. I found out UKG is as much expensive as doing MBA in my institute today. So they ask for lump sum amount and this and that and other thing, So my neighbor was telling that for one child it something like 12 to 15,000 rupees. So it comes to, if you have 2 child or then. So education is very expensive, and in India unfortunately they don't give loan for school education. It's something very, I cannot believe. I am on the board of some banks. I always used to argue, you should give for school also. When you give for IIT and IIM, why not for school education? Because you say that you won't give money for foundation, but for 6th and 7th floor building you will give, how it is possible? So one has to build it from below. All over the world, so education loan is a very major factor. And the third is the automobile, in terms of buying scooter or car or two-wheeler and other thing. And then fourth is the credit card actually. Everything in those countries is on credit. An average US family, it is suggested something like 13 operating credit card they have got. Everything is on credit. Womb to tomb, birth you have to give credit card, delivery and other thing, and tomb, last casket, the priest comes and flowers have to be arranged, also on credit. Everything is on credit, nothing is on. So that's a huge amount of borrowing. Now these borrowings are actually killing the individual households. Huge amount. And there was a time, I think if I remember correctly the number, some 12 trillion used to be the credit limit of US banks given to the customers. Credit card limit, I am sure you understand, the one up to which you can draw, beyond which you are not expected to draw. You may not draw up to the limit, you may draw much lower than the limit. 12 trillion, at that time it was 15 trillion or something their GDP. So, and then of course the 2008 crisis came and so many of them withdrew the facility and chaos took place. So this is the picture is, so this is the amount of indebtedness of those countries. Phenomenal amount of debt has been acquired on all those factors I was mentioning to you: credit card, auto loan, student loan, mortgage. These are the major factors. Now, and unfortunately household debt is never written off. Agitation for writing of farmers debt is there. Everywhere people agitate, and farmers debt, or sometimes the debt of other type of categories of people, but not housewives. There is no agitation by households that kindly write off our debts. So far, they can also go to the road with that Bella and then, shout kindly, but that doesn't happen. So this is now question is why there is so much amount of borrowing by those households in those countries. The reason is they have forgotten the word called savings. There is a 6-letter word called savings that's not there in the dictionary. My American colleague asked, what is the saving you are talking about? They have never thought about savings at all. That's gone. It's only spending. And this credit is available, you spend like anybody's business, right? What they call shop till you drop. You should fall down while coming out of the shopping mall, with your bags and other. Shop till you drop. So that is a saving is gone. And why saving is gone? Unlike countries like India and China, we are one of the largest savers. We save around 28 to 30% of our GDP, highest actually in the world. Why saving is gone? We will just see the families have declined. Family as an institution is gone in those countries. And why do people save? People save because of families, for their children, grandchildren, spouse. If something happens to me, what will happen? On an average, surveys have revealed bachelors save much lesser than people with families and children. So when family as an institution is gone, the incentive for saving is not there. One. Second is, in those countries, particularly the northern European countries, the government takes care of all the requirements. When you retire, your retirement benefit, your health care benefits, all of them is taken care by the government. So what you may loosely call families have been nationalized. Families have been nationalized. Business is privatized. So this is the very interesting model. Everything will be maa baap ka sarkar. If somebody is ill, government should take care of it. If somebody is coughing, government should take care of it. If some children are born, then government should. Everything government should. What does the government say? That is the type of an argument. You can see here household saving mostly in single digit in most of those countries. People have forgotten how to save, except India and China. India is net saving, China is gross saving. That's a technical, that's why China looks like having a larger saving. Both are on similar footing. And within this, household saving is the maximum in both the countries. That's something which we should, it's not government saving, it's not company saving, it is household saving. So ordinary housewives of India are mainly responsible for our economic growth. We should remember that. Who is responsible for our economic growth? Somebody in Delhi asked me in a meeting, I told an average Indian housewife is solely responsible for our economic growth, because the saving comes from them. At least the girl should clap, yaar, what is this? Huh? The boys need not, right? Okay. So this is so saving is phenomenally high, and it is the household saving. We will see that number also. I was telling about decline in families. You can see this was 17 number, now it has gone up actually. Roughly half of US children are born to couple out of wedlock. Right. When I was in school, these children were called, the word is not used anymore as bastards and other, that time. Now it's called, these people are called new normal children in America, US. They are called new normal. And among blacks it is very high. 75 per 3/4 of the black children are out of wedlock. That means without. So you have a huge number of single parent families. Single parent is mostly single mother, not single father. So we had a joint family, then we had a, what is that called, nuclear family. Now it is proton family. One parent family, that's called proton family. and after some time we will have only no parent family, children only, right? Electron or whatever, right, you call it. Serious issue this is actually, very massive issue, and mother alone families are phenomenally, and they struggle hard in order to meet the requirement of the family. Many of them may not be earning well also, so the government steps in and provides some amount, 200 pound or $300 like that for these type of women who are supporting families, and they have more issues in terms of educating their children, giving them some direction, and unfortunately many of these kids get into drugs and illicit arms, and because lot of studies have shown at that age father is required all over the world as a controlling variable. You just tell the child, Appa will come and I will tell him, father will come, sort of the child also get worried, oh I should not do this, and like this is at that age most important. As he grows up he knows who is really controlling the family. That's not, that's a totally different thing. Very young age, innocent, and so the single women families are struggling very, very hard. So the reduction in the family size over a period of time. Actually in 40s, the US used to have something like average family size of 8.5. Now it has slowly come down. From 8 it has become 5, and now it is practically either 2 or 1, that is nuclear family or proton families. Because big business reduced the size of the family. It is very important. Business wants smaller families. If there are 12-member family using one refrigerator, if there are 4 3-member family, 4 refrigerator will be used. Kindly remember that. So business did propaganda throughout 70s and 80s that smaller and smaller families are happy families, which is not necessarily true, but they did advertising, they did, even here in India the same thing is happening. You see all this TV serial, everywhere you will find Ekta Kapoor model, like, correct, right? Because they showed, for instance, in a car, husband, wife and 2 kids will be travelling, maybe a dog, and that is called happy family. Happy family will never have mother-in-law, most important. Happy family will not have sisters-in-law, brothers-in-law, no. Happy family means husband, wife and 2 kids. This they propagated and they go on reducing the size of the family. Now it has become to the size of 1. We are also doing the same thing, from joint we have, all our talk about, for instance, a girl getting married, before the question is, are you going to set up your own family or, right? It's the most important type of a thing. That's, same thing we are, because we are genetically connected to the West, let us be very clear about it. Umbilical cords are tied to the West. Whatever they do, we will also do after maybe 5 years or something. Actually, most of my writing I do not do it here in India. I send it there and then ask them to send it back. Then only people will listen. Otherwise, who is going to worry about, right? Here you can see the other countries also percentage is very high. So there is a societal massive amount of explosion and problem is taking place there. And because of the decline in family, decline in savings, decline in, and increase in borrowings and huge amount of debt, indebtedness of households. This is what has happened, and this is not going to be easily reversed. And decline in family is coupled with decline in aggregate population itself. The reproductive rate of many of the countries in Europe today is less than 1. 2 is supposed to be the equilibrating rate, 2.1 they call actually. Many of the countries in Northern Europe particularly, it is 0.8, 0.7. Government has given a lot of incentive to encourage family to have more children, tax deduction, free education for the second child. So many they have none of them seem to be working. So, they have a huge amount of demographic imbalance in terms of decrease in population. Two other countries facing that other than Europe is Japan and Russia. Both the countries are facing the problem of decrease in population. So, this is the crisis. Coupled with that, youth unemployment is phenomenally high. Youth in those countries is strictly defined as 16 to 24. 16 to 24 only is considered youth, because in India, even at 50, 55, there are youth icons, they are called, youth leaders and anybody. One student told me, sir, you are also youth. I was very happy. All are youth in India, right? Up to 90, I think, right? Something like that. Up to 70. Anyhow, so the youth leaders are 50 average here, but there it is 16 to 24, not an age more. This is monitored continuously, because even now this is, unfortunately this has increased in some of these countries. This is 2016-17. This is monitored because the youth is volatile section. They can come to the road and throw stones on buses. And if you are unemployed at 55, you may curse God or pray to go to a temple or church or something like that. Nothing. At 55, what are you going to do if you are unemployed, right? But at 20, if you are unemployed, you could be much more violent. So, that is the thing. This is what we were talking about. Demography is significantly declining. Europe is disappearing from the world map practically. That you can. Europe used to have 25% of the world population before the First World War. Every fourth person was a European. Today it is around 10%, and it is expected to become 2 to 3% in another 30-40 years. So, it is not, it is gone. At least my grandson need not mug up that Budapest is the capital of Hungary and other things, which I used to do in school. So many European countries which I do not know at all. I have to recognize who is which capital. I always used to confuse. Used to say Norway is the capital of Sweden and Sweden is the capital of, and my teacher was good enough. She will give grace mark. So, right? At least you can remember countries like Sweden and all. So grace mark. It's all right. But decline you can see. The North America, that is USA, is not significantly affected, because USA has got this Mexico, which is Bangladesh to India, is Mexico to USA. So, they go on sending people to USA. I am sure you would be reading a newspaper report about, they want to build a wall, and some discussion is going on. I asked one of my colleague at Atlanta, who will build that wall? He told, it's a good question, who will build that? I told, Mexicans have to build that wall. There is nobody else will build the wall. After building the wall, they will all be on this side of the wall. They won't go to the other side. Building a wall is not a joke around USA, right? So, but they get people inside, and usual debate, should they be allowed. Incidentally, USA has got one register of citizens, because here there is so much debate, should we have or should we not. Almost all the European countries, Russia, China, every country has got citizens registered, including Pakistan and Bangladesh. So, only in India there is a debate, should we have or should we not have, right. So, this is anyhow, US is not going to face such a demographic crisis, and the Bible Belt, as it is called, is significantly what one can call toward the Catholic Church, which still follows the traditional, not having this family planning and other things. Unlike Europe, Europe has become completely agnostic, or what we may loosely call not church going. That is one of the major complaint of even Pope about Europe. Europe has moved completely away from church, or but US is not still so much on the agnostic or something. Europe situation is extremely what one can call bad. I remember once, was it in England or France, I think, there is a church which can accommodate 2000 people. 2000 is the size. On a Sunday morning, there were 7 people inside. I was the 8th. I also went and sat there. That preacher, he was, after the ceremony, came to me, he patted me and, where are you from? I told, I am from India. He was very happy that all the way you have come, and he told, of course, you are all in darkness, he told me. I told, yes, massive power cut, what to do, this. So like this we were discussing for some 10 minutes. He was talking about darkness, I was talking about power cut and all these atomic plants are not working, what to do. Anyhow, this went on. What I want to say is, many of the churches are now getting converted into pubs, big churches. Of course, both are connected with spiritual, in the sense. Spirit is involved, but so Europe situation is not good, to say the least, right? Big companies, small families, I told. Another major thing is, this is something which next 3 to 5 years it will burst. Every day huge number of refugees are trying to get into, actually not Germany, Europe. Every day. It's Germany is not correct. Europe. So, and so many people are coming by boats, barges, and I am sure you will be reading in newspaper. Sometime, unfortunately, they sink into the sea. Many of them from Africa, and a lot of agents have now come. They collect some $8,000 or $10,000. I will take you to Italy or Greece, because once you get into one portion of Europe, you can travel all around because of this Schengen visa free. So there is a massive problem for them in terms of every country in Europe is facing this. And some countries have, like Poland, Hungary, Austria, they have all banned. In the sense, they have all erected the barriers. They are coming out of Europe. So Europe as a project or as a combined thing is collapsing. So Europe project is gone. Britain has already come out, and take my word for it, France and Italy will next go out. Only Germany will be remaining, one country, and that can't be a union, one country is one country only. So that is the European. So what happened is, most of these economic crisis, you blame the migrants, right? Everywhere in the world, whether it is Delhi or whether it is Bangalore, or whenever there is an economic problem, we say that migrants are responsible for it, because they have come and taken away our jobs. Same thing in Europe, all these migrants are blamed. They are not taken much of their job, but still, and most of the migrants belong to Islam as a religion. So what is happening is, anti-migrant feeling is becoming anti-Islam feeling. So that is the cocktail which Europe is facing today. So this is, and kindly recall, all global conflicts started from Europe, not from Africa, not from Asia. Whether it is Crusades, or whether it is Andalusian War, or Ottoman Empire War, or the First World War, Second World War, all wars were in Europe only. And it started in Europe, became global wars. So all conflicts are European centric. So this is a very major issue, confronting Europe today actually. So there is a general revolt against what is loosely called globalization. Many of these countries are not accepting anymore, and Trump, of course, is the leading anti-globalization. He has come out of Paris Accord. He may even come out of WTO, and I wouldn't be surprised if he comes out of UN also. He doesn't believe in all this. He says these are all talking shops. So much better to have one-to-one deal. I will meet the one country, and then we will have a deal with that. Not this group, and he doesn't believe in. Europe is in turmoil. China says that it will lead new globalization. That's something very worrisome for everybody else. China says we will take up the lead. But of course, last few months they are facing this problem of this virus, which is spreading all over, and war between radical Islam and West. This is the sort of a scenario there which is creating huge economic crisis. But our own situation, very quickly if you look at it, our agriculture constitutes something like 17-18% of our economy, mining is around 16, services are 2/3 of our economy. They constitute the largest chunk of our economy. Services mean everybody remembers Narayan Murthy immediately, that, but computer services or ITES is 5 to 6% only. Our major services are construction, wholesale and retail trade, then this transport, both passenger as well as goods transport, then hotels and restaurant is another major service, and restaurant is the fastest growing service actually today in India. It is growing around 8 to 10% for the last I think 1 decade. Very, very fast growing, right. This they were telling, the Zomato and Swiggy are telling that we had some 100 crore distribution last year, 1 billion, and they expect to do 2 billion in the next 2 years, right. Everywhere they are the fast growing, and cooking at home is becoming less and less, right. Earlier it was my grandmother time, it used to be 3 hot meals per day, right. Now it is slowly reducing, 1 hot meal per day and others are heated meal, right. And I think within a few years we will sell houses as 1 BH only, no K. Nowadays they advertise 3 BHK, 2 BHK, K portion will be cut off, I am very sure about it. House will be only, why? You can always eat out. Eat out has become a common thing. Otherwise restaurant business did not grow at so much percentage in India actually among the services. Then you have fitter, plumber, carpenter and hundreds of services which are flourishing actually. So you can see, most important point is net domestic product, this is gross and net is different, is capital consumption or depreciation. See, if you see in this, agriculture is something roughly 17, that sign indicate approximately, and government is something like 19, all government. Then corporate is 14 only, then non-corporate is 50% of our economy. That is partnership, proprietorship firms, non-corporate. That's called residual, which is funny because in US it's some 6-7%. So it's called residual. India also we call it residual. 50% can't be called residual actually. India is the only country where 50% is considered as residual. It's not. And it is sometimes also called unorganized. Actually it is much better organized than all your ITC and Hindustan Lever and other thing. For instance, I have a vegetable vendor near my home who comes around 7 o'clock. She comes in a, what is that called, scooty. She brings some 1 truckload of vegetable. I don't know how she manages. 1 truckload in a scooty she brings happily, and then she keeps her shop, and the evening around 7 she closes. Every day she does this job. She knows her customer, she knows her product, she knows her borrower, she knows all the things. And she is categorized as unorganized. Can you believe that? She is categorized as unorganized by our statistical methods. That is more interesting is government is categorized as organized. That is what something which is funny, Government is totally unorganized, if at all disorganized actually, but it is considered as organized. So this is the sort of type of definitions we use and other thing. So they constitute actually more than 2/3 of our economy. The entire service sector they are dominant. Your wholesale trade, retail trade, your restaurant and all your transportation are all mostly partnership and proprietorship firms. They are the ones who are, and they are the ones who are growing also very fast. They are growing around something like 8 to 10. Because of their growth, our economy is growing. Agriculture is not growing much. It's around 1.5, 2% another. So this is the Employment of course is something very interesting. Private, corporate is only 12 to 15% of our employment. Huge portion of our employment is self-employed and contract labor. So much of the discussion on employment is without any proper data and other thing. Because huge number of these self-employed people are not captured in our employment. I told you about this Zomato, Swiggy. They are employing something like half a million, 5 lakh people, and they are expected to employ 15 lakh people in another, as an example. So many other, and this is not fully captured in our employment data. For instance, today in Bangalore or Chennai, or I do not know about Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Chennai or Hyderabad today, if you want a plumber or a carpenter or an electrician, you typically get person from Orissa or Bihar, not from local. I can't locate a Kannadiga plumber or so. From Orissa actually. One district of Orissa supplies 60% of global national plumbers, Kendarpara. Almost all plumbers come from, it is a plumber capital of the, plumbing capital of the country, like IT capital, right? And similarly, carpenter, if I want to get, I get a Bihari carpenter in Bangalore or Chennai, or I am not sure about this place. A lot of, what I want to stress is huge amount of migration is taking place. Almost all the beauty parlors in Chennai, Bangalore and Hyderabad are all run by, or this Assamese, Manipur, northeast people are, I do not know about Ahmedabad. Here also they are there running. So this northeast, the Assamese have taken a decision. We will beautify the Tamil and Kannada girls, and then they have come there. And I am not joking. Not even one is run by. Who is capturing all these data? I ask always Niti Aayog, or are you estimating, or they are not fully capturing. So huge amount of east and northeast, maybe Bangladesh also, is moving to south for jobs, and that is not fully. So this is the huge problem in India. We do not have a mechanism to capture the full level of employment. So generally there is a shouting, unemployment is increasing and employment is not, but none of which is based on factual data. Saving, we discussed about it. Our saving is, household saving is the largest. As we saw earlier, the self-employed and contract labor, they are the largest segment, and unfortunately they do not have any regular pension scheme like government or private corporate or something. They have to take care of their own need. If somebody is running a retail shop at 65, if he has got a kidney problem, he has to take care of his own thing. So what happens is, for old age security and for health reasons, families save more in India, because in other countries I told you the government is pitching in. Here there is no, unless you save for your own future. If you are in government service, you get some amount of this pensionary benefit and other thing, but not for all, right. So that is one of the major reason is old age security, health and education, as I told you. Education is also very important, for which you have to save, because as school education is becoming so expensive, you have to spend on that, which means you have to save a lot. I jokingly always mentioned, my colleague at Atlanta always used to ask me, why your women are so much worried about education of their children in India. Your mothers are very concerned about where their kids go to, under the other day I was in a house, I asked the child, which class you are studying. His father told he is in 6th standard. Then the boy told, no Appa, I am in 8th standard. Father was not knowing properly which class the son is studying. But you ask his mother, she will tell exactly which class, what is the assignment, what is the homework next day, and who are his friends in the WhatsApp, all that she will be monitoring. She will be very worried about it and concerned, right. So that's So my colleague asked why your mothers are so. One is, unfortunately we are equating expensive education with quality education. If you ask a child how much, your school education, one place they say 15,000 rupees, another place they say 20,000 rupees. I think 20,000 is better quality. So he was asking me why your women are, I told very simple sir, you do not understand India first of all. You don't know about Indian women. Every woman in India want their children to be better than their husband, very simple. Because this cannot be improved, right. A husband is like an ambassador car. You can't sell it, you can't run it, you keep it like a furniture, paint it and keep it. So the children are one which is future. So we invest on them. So education is another reason why our saving is relatively high. And fourth, everybody knows is bribing, cash. Every activity in India requires bribe if it has to deal with government, water connection, power connection, this and that, everything. So you have to, if you want to get a license, if you want to get this. So for that also you require to have enough amount of saving. Bribing you cannot do in check as of now, it is not encouraged, right, only in cash. So this is the why our saving rate is high, it will continue to be high at least for next couple of decades, right, unless some changes take place. Housewives are primary reason for our economic growth. Earlier I told you this, remember this. So these are fastest growing sectors, we mentioned about it. Trade, transport, hotels, restaurant, all these are some of the very fast growing sectors in India. And this is something everybody talks about FII and FDI. I am sure you would have heard about it, right? Foreign institutional investment and foreign direct investment. But they do not constitute more than 8 to 10% of our economy. Largest saving is domestic saving by the household, right. Goldman Sachs, that is most important, one should always quote some foreign companies, otherwise I won't have credibility, right. Goldman Sachs says in 2010 itself that our infrastructure investment can be met by domestic saving. 1.4 trillion, now it is around 8 trillion actually, absolutely. So we are basically a domestic saving, domestic demand driven economy. I think we should remember this. We are not like small countries like Taiwan or Thailand or something like that. So when there is a crisis in Europe, US, Taiwan, Thailand and other things are significantly affected because their export market is phenomenally hurt. So they are not able to, our market, domestic market itself is so large, already we are serving some 600, 650 million, so some more are pending, huge amount is waiting to be met. So we are basically a domestic saving, domestic demand. So FII and FDI is like pickle to curd rice. Since I come from south, I am using pickle to curd rice, otherwise you can use some gur to paratha or something like that, right, whatever. It is not the main dish, that is what we want to stress. So do not too much get worried about how much is our FII and FDI. Last point is stock market. Everybody is worried about Sensex. Early morning, where is Nifty, where is Sensex, particularly in this part of the country, right, more people are more worried, right. Household financial saving, roughly 3% only goes to these shares and bonds, nothing more than that, right. All the Nifty companies put together may be around 2 to 3% of the GDP. It is not something spectacular or something. We are basically a bank oriented economy. Huge portion of our saving goes into banks, then into postal insurance, postal savings, cooperative bank savings, then in other insurance, all this. So China is also bank oriented, Japan is also bank oriented. At one point of time in Japan, the banks told we will charge you if you keep money with us, because they were having more funds, but still people went and kept money only in the banks. Europe is also bank oriented. Only country which is share market obsessed is US. And we think that whole world is like US. No. Somehow our Indians are not very enthusiastic about share bazaar, except this part of the country, some of the towns and other thing where people are very otherwise on an average. So, because we call them million Abhimanyus in the share bazaar. Some of you might have heard about Abhimanyu. How many of you have heard about Abhimanyu? I am curious. Not very many. Rise full. If you rise like this, that means half Abhimanyu only you know. Rise fully. Reasonable. He is one of the major characters in one of the stories. Huge, big stories. One girl came and asked me, sir, I know 2 stories. In which story he comes, sir? I asked, which 2 stories you know? She told, sir, in one story a lady was kidnapped. In another story a sari was removed. Which story he comes, sir? I told, it is my story that I have to come and anyhow he comes in Mahabharata. He knew how to enter into a view, chakra view he could get into, but he didn't know how to come out of it. Because the story goes that when mother was pregnant, he was taught about how to enter. By the time he was told how to come out, she delivered him and that's true. Anyhow, point is, large number of people unfortunately enter into share market, but they are not able to come out of it. And something like 750 companies are missing in the share market in India. Not directors, companies themselves are missing. And the company secretary, they have been asked to have a look at this, right. So much amount of not so trusting of the share market. Somehow it is considered as some sort of a gambling place or something. That's why huge amount of saving is not going there as of now, right. Okay. And RBI of course rates we all discussed, but huge amount of borrowing today is done by unorganized sector, from the unorganized money market, money lenders and other type of people, where the interest rate can be 2 to 6% per month. My flower vendor borrows around 1% per day at 180%. She does not have any clue regarding RBI or banking system or something. So, significant portion of our economy is borrowing outside the financial institution. That is what is happening. And gold is a major. We normally say gold is unproductive and other thing, all useless argument. Gold is the most productive investment in India. Kindly note, it is a major collateral in small business. All the vegetable vendors, all my flower vendors, all my small restaurant owners, all of them borrow funds based on gold as a mortgage. They do not have share, they do not have bond, they do not have LIC, nothing is there. The only security available with them is the gold. So, that is one of the major important thing. It is a collateral in small businesses, one. Second is, it is also useful as a old age pension, particularly when the husband dies, the poor woman will be left only with her gold, nothing else. And you can acquire it in small quantity and easy to pass it on to next generation. You do not require any documentation or any income tax, nothing. Just hand it over to the next owner. It is a major collateral. So, kindly do not accept if somebody says gold is unproductive or anything. Lot of people go on arguing about return on gold versus return on share. All are crap. All are useless, because to the best of my knowledge, nobody buys gold to sell it. People buy gold and keep it. Except in a major emergency, we do not trade in gold. So, lot of this argument about return is not adequate are all useful for other countries, not here. Here people buy and keep it. And very interesting, we did a survey of some 12,000 people as part of one of the project we undertook. We published a book also about saving habit of Indians. That was around 2006-07 I think. One of the questions we asked is, how much gold is your wife is having? You will be surprised to know 99% of the husband did not know. the correct answer. Some of the married people here, how many are married here incidentally? You can, some people. So you can think about it and answer yourself, right? They didn't know. Somebody told 40 grams, she was having 4,000 grams. Somebody told 400 grams, she was having only 40. You know, the variation in statistical term was 8 to 9 sigma. And many of the husbands, we asked, your answer are not correct. He told, no sir, we don't know what she is doing. Sometimes she changes anklet into necklace, necklace into bangle, bangle into anklet, and you know, I can't keep track of what is happening. So I have given up, right? So very interesting actually. So in some meeting in RBI and Finance Ministry, there was a big discussion about gold. Then I told, look, if husbands do not know how much gold the wife is having, Government of India will never ever come to know of it, right? It's not required. You just leave it at peace, right? So there is no need for you to worry about it, right? So this is something interesting, futuristic, 2019 to 2035. There was a project done by Oxford Economics. Last month this was released actually. It will come in the paper later. They studied 100 towns of the world which are fastest growing. Good news is top 10 are all in India. All the towns top 10 are in India. And topmost is, you can see there. The topmost town which is expected to have fascinating growth in the 2019 to 35 is, how many Surtis are here? Not many, one or two are there anyhow. That's a topmost. Then you have other, and you can see here Bombay, Delhi are not mentioned because they have exhausted their current level of growth. They have to grow outside, in the sense outskirts and other thing. So this is something which is the 11th town is in China, 12th is in China, then 13th, 14th are in Australia. Like that it goes, you know, various. So there is a huge amount of potential which is available within our own country, right, which is expected to grow. So there is a crisis, no doubt about it, but it's purely an Anglo-Saxon crisis. Let us not confuse that we are also in, we are not in crisis or anything. We are quite okay, right? And whatever took place in the form of growth of the Europe and US is coming to a close. This we have to internalize. It's very difficult for us to take this, but it's a fact. So the future belongs to economies like ours, and our large portion of our economy is non-corporate or partnership proprietorship firms, which are, and the service sector is fastest growing in our economy. Huge amount of entrepreneurship is available, and so we should know all economic models are not universal, first point, and the US model fit every society is not correct. Right. Each society should base it on its own culture values and develop its own models and solutions. There is nothing called Sarvaroga Nivarani, one Aushad will be given in New York and everybody will, sorry, it does not work like that. So every society has to, and imported models does not help, even though we may go gaga about it, we may be very enthusiastic about it, but it does not work beyond a point. So this is the message which we should have. This we will see later. So basically concluding, the West, they nationalize families, maa baap ka sarkar, everything government should do. If I sneeze immediately, people will say what government is doing. What is the Chief Minister of Gujarat is doing? The guest has come from south and he is sneezing. So why is he not being taken care? Some news item, and savings is gone there. Families have declined. They are right-based society. That is another thing. Everything is, cockroach right, animal rights, human rights, woman rights. Everything is only, there is no duties. Unless and until society remembers that duties are also equally important, right? Most important, right? When you, actually very unfortunate, whenever I come from abroad to India, When I get into the airport, first board I see there is duty free. Huge board is written, duty free. That means you have come into a country where there are no duties, only rights. And relationship, even today we are broadly relationship based society. We are not right based, we do not write contract for everything. For instance, so far at least prenuptial contract is not there in India. You do not sign a contract that when we get married, when we divorce, what will happen? Who will take the fridge, who will take the TV, who will take the dog, and no. We are still mostly relationship based society. And lawyers and accountants flourish. That is not a very desirable thing, sorry to tell. Who should flourish? Artists, musicians, and all these people should flourish. So, this is something. Our worldview is cyclical. We are not linear. Most important, we believe that things do repeat. There is nothing to go wrong about it or anything. We are plant and animal friendly by and large. My colleagues always used to be fascinated. They say India is the only country when we travel, we find women worshipping trees on the roads. Some side roads you find always somebody putting some water on a tree, or kumkum or a chandan or something. Everywhere in the country you will find actually. So, nowhere in the world plant is worshipped by people. You can ask so much amount of logic and reason, no, but still people are, and animal friendly. Like one elephant died yesterday in Guruvayur temple. You believe me, sir, some millions of people have gathered there to give a send off to that elephant. It was 104 years old, one of the oldest living mammal actually. It was considered as God himself actually. So, huge number of people to give a fondly send off to that elephant. We are relationship based so far, families are not completely nationalized. So, there are some strengths for us which we should be using. So, in conclusion, the global economic crisis is actually not global, it is only local for those people, and our situation is comfortable and we have much better possibilities and opportunities, and youngsters like you are entering into the workforce in the next few years or just joining. Thank you.